Have you sacrificed a chicken to the YouTube gods?
I have just sacrificed. Yep, sacrificed chickens to YouTube gods. I believe all technical issues are now to one side. Once again, I've had to reload the page several times, but we are now live. Welcome everyone who is watching. Got any viewers at this particular point in time? But I'm sure they will. If we build it, they will come and all of that. So we'll play
Indeed.
it. So the title of tonight's stream is "Make Africa and Australia Great Again," and as I've mentioned in the title, we're basically going to be looking into the ideas of reversing the desert, or reversing desertification, for the correct term, in places like the Great Sandy Desert of Australia and the Sahara Desert of Africa, via large engineering works, hydroponics, and power generation in general, using solar towers, and whether or not it would be a good idea to turn very, very large sandy areas into rich arable land that in 50 years' time will be potentially the breadbasket of the world, or at least another breadbasket for the world, and somewhere to produce oxygen. With me is Ez, so welcome Ez. Uh,
Hello there.
and yeah, that's sort of kick this off, because this is an idea I've been playing around with for quite a while now. Which is a simple idea of using the solar tower systems that we've seen cropping up in places like Spain and elsewhere, which are absolutely magnificent power generation systems. And I'm serious. In fact, let's just transition this image I've got over here of one of these solar towers. I mean, they're a spectacular piece of modern architecture in and of their own right. They're a massive circle of mirrors that shine sunlight onto the top of a tower, and it melts salt. It melts salt up to about 560 degrees Celsius, and then it pushes that molten salt through a heat exchanger to boil water and spin a turbine. And these things generate a hell of a lot of electricity, and they're pretty impressive. They're certainly a major kick in the backside of things like the photovoltaic cell, etc., in terms of efficiency. And they've made solar power a real winner. And places like sandy deserts, like the Sahara, hot deserts, etc., like the one in Australia as well, ideal places for these types of setups. And it's a clean way of generating electricity. And I just figured, hold on, we've got these massive areas of dunes. We've got people concerned the world over. Environmentalists are concerned about deserts growing at a massive rate. I've read figures in and around. Said it was something like 2,000 square kilometers a year is lost to the desert. Was it here? Was it in this one? Can we turn back in an age of climate change? And yeah, people are spending,
1,000.
yeah, thousands of kilometers a year we're losing in to desert. Here we
That's
go.
bigger than you might think.
Yeah. State Forestry reports it's now shrunk to an average of 2,424 square kilometers a year are lost to desert. And we've got an ever increasing global population, and we are losing land that could produce food and support population centers. We've also got issues like economic migration from Africa into Europe, because there are jobs that are scarce, essentially, and there is more wealth to be had in Europe than Africa, to be blunt. Other reasons aside, that seems to be a large driving factor for that. Now, I just started sort of putting things together. That, well, we've got a really simple way of generating a lot of electricity. Pumping water is pretty easy in many respects, and why couldn't we basically tap into say the Mediterranean in Libya, use a string of these solar tower power generation systems all the way down the line to generate electricity and build wealth into the area, and alongside that have a massive pipeline of water being pumped inland, using the power generation to pump the water inland and purify it, and then spread it out across recyclable materials such as literally something as benign as used nappies would actually make an excellent material for dropping straight onto the ground, pouring water onto it, and then growing a fast growing plant, something like hemp or flax, etc., something that grows at a rapid rate of knots to basically over the space of 20-30 years replenish your topsoil by putting carbon and
Yes,
plant matter back on top of
but
the ground.
which country will want to be known as crapland?
um, I I take your point, but seriously, I mean the idea of recycled nappies, it it's silly, but we use stuff like rock wool insulation for hydroponic systems because it's massively absorbent of liquid, and then you just stick a seed or something on it, and that seed will grow roots into that nappy or rock wool or whatever. And you know
No,
what?
I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying, it's like
I
I'm having trouble picturing the logistics system where all nappies from around the world are picked up and taken to somewhere in Africa.
You know what?
I
You
mean,
know what? I reckon I could actually get quite a big greeny movement, if you like, of nice lefty activists that have all got the world's best interests at heart
mm,
to applaud that, because nappies are a bugger to recycle. They end up in landfills, and they are a bit of a toxic hazard. There's all sorts of problems with disposable nappies that I would be supplying a a, a pretty good use for, rather than them just clogging up landfills in their home country. We'd be able to
the
transport.
phrasing you're using right now.
Basically, we would be able
Movement,
to use the crap of our
clogging.
young. Yes, clogging up landfills. I know, but we would literally be able to use the crap of our children to improve deserts
It's.
in
I mean,
foreign
there is
lands.
merit to it. I just, again, can you imagine that logistics system?
um, I wouldn't want to be involved in it on a hands-on basis, but people recycle all sorts of stuff, and there's all sorts of fairly nasty logistics involved in it. Nappies are
We
already a
could have a
problem
really
like
good
this.
slogan for it though. It's like we take your crap so you don't have to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could tie in local councils to have bins for nappies or some sort of disposal unit for nappies, and then a collection vehicle could come around and collect them en masse where they were needed, like a bin collection system. Um, you do it every third week or something, whatever, every month. Uh, Actually, that would be gross. That would be dirty. No, whatever. I don't.
God,
The
at
nitty
least you'll
gritty.
keep the foxes away.
Yeah, the nitty gritty of the recycling of the nappies isn't exactly where I wanted to go with this, but no, I was just throwing that out there as a potential material. I mean, I was also going to suggest we used literally recycle old jet engines off commercial liners as the turbines we would use along the way. I would really try to do as much of this in
Hmm.
recycled material as possible. There's no point in, oh well, you're going to need high pressure gas turbines to generate the electricity. Great. Well, we'll go over to that scrapyard over there with the 737, and we'll whip those engines off it, and we'll give it a go. We'll take the combustion chamber out, and let's see if we push hot gas through this thing. If it spins up and acts like a turbine, oh yes, it does. Can we get electricity from it? Yes. Job done. It's a lot cheaper than buying them new.
I think the real problem is not so much the. You're right. These solar salt systems. I forget the proper name. I'm afraid.
These solar
Um,
towers, yeah, they're
yeah, yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Like they're a modern feat of engineering.
yes,
But there are some caveats here that we have to consider.
sure.
One is you need a big area of flat ground,
Mhm.
which some parts of Africa and Australia, yeah. But if you've ever had a look on a Google map of those areas, there's some areas where that is just not going to happen. They also need to
Uh,
have solid foundations for the tower, surely.
yes, let's have a look. Let's look at Australia first, because I have actually anticipated a little that you want to say this. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Now, the idea I had was specifically the Great Sandy Desert in Australia, as it would be a great starting point. So
Mm.
let's get me, because essentially you've got the Indian Ocean up here. Let's get that. Got the Indian Ocean here.
I have to wait for the stream
Ye-
to catch up. Ah, there we go.
And there's nothing, absolutely fuck all in Australia up there except a gigantic shoreline and then a big
Mm.
ass desert. And all of this area here, apart from a series of uh, mineral deposits, etc., underground, is basically really, really, really horrible, hard terrain. And it is it. The things with Australia is Australia used to be pretty much all a gigantic rainforest till about 50,000 years ago.
Mm.
And then sort of slash and burn farmers moved in from the uh, the north and landed on Australia, and the what we now call the Aboriginals. Basically, in their early days, yeah, they were not so at one with the land, and they just slash and burned the entire continent down to a desert, largely. And
Maybe that's why that lake is called Lake Disappointment.
oh, and well, this is it. You've got all of these little lakes here, all of these natural springs. There's lots of water out there in spots, but at parts it's just been dry and desert for too long, and it's no longer there. And you could link all of this area up. The whole thing is this whole area here could very easily act as a. I mean, we're talking about a chunk of land that's. I mean, we're not talking Amazon rainforest size, but we're talking a fair old proportion of the Amazon rainforest. And if we can reverse that via modern technology, maybe we can start utilizing a continent that is very sparsely populated at the present moment. It's got the landmass of, well, a large amount of North America, and it's got the population of, well, less than England. Um, there could be cities all over that place, huge industries. There would still be miles away from anywhere. I mean, the distance between Perth and Darwin, or Perth and Adelaide, is actually further away than the nearest city to Perth is actually on another continent. That's the sort of distance between Perth and Darwin and Perth and Adelaide. There's so much space between Perth and the rest of Australia, and there's literally fuck all there. Big ass deserts, a couple of mines,
Mm.
and it just strikes me that would be an ideal one, and of course the other option was to go in and, as I said, for the Sahara, and cut in essentially through the hellhole that is Libya at the present moment, and you've got a massive area of desert, all of this area over here, all of this area over here, and I'm desperately trying to avoid drawing comedy rude things on the map as I'm going.
I have to wait on the stream, so I haven't seen it yet.
See, because it's generally sort of an inroad there, and yep, as we can see, there's tons of desert. The Sahara Desert is a massive area, and again, bugger all in it but sand. And
Keep in mind that that's not entirely true.
no, no, and there
I
are
mean,
ecosystems
you
within there.
know, when we say, like, for example, the Australian desert,
Hmm.
it's actually got quite a lot of plant life and animal life in it still.
Parts of
Not as
it.
much as you'd expect for
Yeah.
its latitude and the
Yes.
rivers and lakes
The,
around it.
there is always an ecosystem, and life finds a way. But as I said, we're losing massive swathes of land. You know, 2,500 kilometers of land a year to desert. And if we can reverse that, and there are people doing stuff to reverse it. There are people doing a lot of work to reverse it. A guy called Alan Savory. I've had a number of conversations about this guy in the past. He did a TED talk I watched. See if I can pull that together here.
Well, yeah, I
Here we
mean,
go.
the other thing though,
This
sorry,
chap.
go on.
This chap, yeah. Now he's been working on how to fight desertification and reverse climate change, by using cattle migration patterns, and it's a good system. I mean, he's had some. See if I can find some images of. Oh, where is it? There we go. That's a picture. It's not a great picture. It's not, unfortunately, not a very big picture. But as you can see on one side, what he's done is he's been using this migratory pattern of cattle. And over 20 years or so, he's been running cattle in a fake migratory pattern on a group of land. Basically doing a crop rotation type system, but with cattle. And on the other side, we've got untended land. And as you can see, his side of the desert is doing a lot better through migration of crops and actually using cattle as a way of reversing the desert, which is an interesting counter argument to the whole cattle are a cause for climate change, because we can use cattle to reverse it. And
Well,
I'm not saying
over cattling.
over well, usually when you look into it, the problem with cattle is everyone sort of go, oh, it's a very, very carbon negative system and yada yada yada. It usually works out that it's because you're transporting food to the cattle that causes the negative impact on there, and that's because of transportation systems. And if you feed cattle grass that you're growing, it tends to not be a carbon. In fact, it can even be a carbon positive, especially in this case because it's creating plant life that's then literally taking carbon dioxide out of the air, building cellulose with it, and locking it into at least at the beginning part of the carbon cycle on the ground. That takes carbon dioxide out of the air, and we've all been told many many times that carbon dioxide is the cause of global warming. Um, I,
I
I
thought it was water.
I think water vapor is more of an issue personally, but this might also help on that front because water is a key constituent here. But this brings us on to the main crux of the issue, I think, here, doesn't it? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're going to be changing climate patterns with this.
Well, there's
There's no
that,
way you
but there's
can't.
also the question of, as I was saying earlier, you build all these solar farms up.
Hmm.
That's not the main, uh, important thing you have to consider. It's getting water there and keeping it there,
Yes.
and it has to be the right sort of water. So, when you said earlier, we'll just take water out of the Med.
Yep.
Not the best place to take it. The Med is saltier than the Atlantic.
Okay. Yeah. No. Fair point. Well, there are plenty of routes of access in to the Sahara Desert. We could easily go in at a different angle. Um, Hold on. Let's just get this picture
Are
up
you
there.
drawing on the map again?
I'm trying not to draw. I'm undoing the drawing. We could easily go in over the on the west hand side of the desert and
Well,
come in.
over the eye of Africa.
Yeah, sort of come in over here instead. It wouldn't be quite as effective at getting and Libya. Libya concerns me. Libya's gone from being a wealthy and profitable state to a state where we've got slavery actively happening left, right, and centre. It occurred to
Well,
me
there's one way to fix that. Just put the whole thing underwater.
it would be nice to bring some wealth and industry back, but again, it might be impossible to deal with Libya. at the present
I mean,
moment, so you couldn't
here's
go
the
in there with an
thing:
international
where
crew.
you have been drawing,
Hmm.
that part of southern, is that Libya or is that Morocco? I'm looking at. That's
That
Morocco's in the top, isn't it?
that's Morocco. Oh god, let me just double check because my African geography is not as good as it could be.
Maybe next time get a map with the countries on it.
No, I can do that. I can do that right now. That's what I was about to do. So it looks like that's Western Sahara and Morocco and Algeria would be dealing with there. And they would be probably a lot better to deal with, but unfortunately the desert isn't quite as bad as it could be over there. But I mean,
Well, here's the thing: there's evidence to suggest that area used to be underwater in the past.
hmm.
Just something to make you think. That whole area could have had a completely different ecosystem. I mean, especially if there were dolphins and sharks and all that stuff in it. But yeah, no. So I don't know if that was
Yeah.
due
So
to
so
man being around, or if that was just natural things changing.
well, you've got. I mean, given enough time, you've got tectonic shifts can raise mountains from the bottom of the ocean to
That's true.
so there's all sorts of stuff on the planet that's weird to work out when and where. But yeah, there's been water, and the myth, legend of the Great Flood. There's tide marks on the Sphinx. Um, so yeah, it might be that. It might be that sort of same time period that we're talking about. But essentially, yeah, it was. I'm looking at North Africa and I'm thinking Libya is in trouble. Libya is struggling. Egypt is barren. Maybe maybe the Med isn't the right route in because as you say, but it seems like a much longer route in from.
Is Egypt really struggling there because they have fresh water from the Nile?
They do, and Egypt was once the breadbasket of the world, and could produce a lot more, but it doesn't. It's difficult to say why without somebody screaming and telling me I'm clearly wrong. Um, but there does seem to be management issues and all sorts of other problems there. Um, this has often been the case. I mean, there's been an awful lot of people meddling in African affairs, in much and vastly improving the output, only to walk away and find it's done more harm than good in the long run, shall we say.
Hmm.
I treated that as gently as I could. Oops, that's the wrong one. Yeah, but yeah, there's been some messes made. So I'm aware of that, but there's a lot of land being lost to desert, and every year more babies are born, more mouths need feeding, and and at the same time we've got weirdos telling me I should be eating sea slugs and algae because that's the only
Who
way to
tells you
feed.
that?
That's oh you look around. There's all sorts of vegans and weird people like that telling you that the future of food is going to have to be algae because we can't feed the growing masses of the nation or the world. Um, and frankly, I'd rather improve farming output and keep on eating steak because I like steak. Sea
Well,
cucumber is revolting.
yeah. There's
And
nothing to
if we
say
can,
we can't have floating farms in the oceans as well.
I know, big rafts of stuff. I mean, and if we get to build gorgeous, gorgeous engineering edifices all over the place, like these solar towers, that I tell you what, if you visit one, you see one from a distance, and you see the light beaming up from the mirrors to that fine point, and the brightness of that does not do it credit. It shines like the sun. It
And then a bird flies over and you get free roast chicken.
Oh yeah, the birds. What I'm saying is you could for myself as an atheist and someone who tries to sort of apply as much scientific rigor as possible whilst having fun, you can almost have a religious experience looking at one of these things. They are quite incredibly beautiful to behold, and you know, why not? Why not build more edifices to the religion
Hmm.
of the day, science? Uh, it could be a great thing, but in the process, are we going to shift the weather patterns of the world? Are we going to do
Inevitably,
harm?
yeah. I think. I mean, the thing that comes to mind straight away is monsoon. And the monsoon has kept India and Vietnam and all those areas, fertile for generations.
Hmm.
Would India be able to actually feed its people without the monsoon?
It's a good question. Would the El Nino effect that hits Australia, would that be changed? Um,
Well, that is generally sped up by low temperature and slowed down by high temperature.
yeah. Now, what we would be doing, we would be making an area that is normally very, very hot and reflective, hot air during the day, very cold during the night. This is the classic sort of uh, symptomatic behavior, if you like, of a hot desert. Is it they are red hot during the day, they are cold as balls during the night because the sand has just reflected the heat straight up all day. None of it's really sunk in. You're getting no energy absorption into the ground. Um, Now, what you would be doing by putting green plant life down there is you would be making it more temperate during the day and a lot warmer during the night because the heat would be locked in. And you only need to travel around hot areas and visit sandy areas and tropical areas to see exactly what's going off there. You go to a tropical rainforest, it's on the same latitude as a desert, one's dry as balls, one's absolutely it's like you're breathing soup, the air has got so much moisture in it. And the real difference there is the fact that the plant life is pulling moisture in.
So, would you want the plant life that you plant to be, say, native African rainforest or crops?
I think it's sensible initially to go for plants that would be able to be used as an initial topsoil event, which is why I was sort of talking briefly about hemp and flax and plants like that. Something
Yeah,
that grows damned rapidly can
well,
fall
that's not
over and break down.
necessarily the best plant. You probably want something that has a lot of nitrogen in it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm no botanist. I just hear that those particular plants grow like crazy, and I was just
Bamboo.
thinking, yeah, bamboo, but you want something that's going to be able to grow rapidly, fall over, and rot underneath a canopy of new growth, because that's how you get your topsoil, and you need to
Could we not
protect
just
that.
simply import topsoil
From
to stop
where?
things going
From where? As I said,
anywhere else in the world?
by stripping topsoil from somewhere else in the world, we would be.
Somewhere where there's permafrost, perhaps, because then you're also bringing water with you.
Mm, that's an interesting idea. So you're thinking digging up Canada, essentially, or Siberia,
Or
and
Siberia.
and taking big lorry loads of Siberian earth and dumping it on top
Hmm.
of the Sahara. I mean, this is it. You would need to at that point. You would need to have crops growing. You would need to have a canopy because the sunlight is just going to just annihilate that soil very rapidly. You're going to need a canopy. You're going to need
What would
stuff.
it do to it?
It's so sodding hot there. It would literally break it down to sand. It would lose its moisture almost, you know,
Hmm.
instantly, and at that point it would then become
So greenhouses.
palm trees.
Thing is, palm trees will lose a lot of moisture through the palms.
I was actually thinking of fake palm trees. big papier-mâché palm trees or
Hmm.
something.
See,
Something that's biodegradable, that would actually add to the biomass and would add a temporary canopy whilst the natural canopy can grow through.
I'd again say greenhouse, because your
Um,
major problem is losing water.
yeah.
And you want to basically increase your water retention rate per unit area, which is what greenhouses are perfect for.
Yes.
Um, and as an aside, the more topsoil you have, the better, because it gives you more endurance against things like droughts, heavy rains, whatever.
You could almost make them out of. You could have them as inflatable greenhouses as well.
Why inflatable?
Just because you don't need to make a rigid structure, then you can literally have them as big
No, you
polythene bags.
don't. But then you've got to constantly pump energy in, and pumping energy increases heat.
I'm not so sure you do, because if you coat the lining, if you make it with the right materials, you can have a literal greenhouse effect going off inside. So the once you pumped it up full of air and you put your goods inside it, the sun that's coming in, mind you, the moment the sun goes down, it's going to reverse the effect. You're right, you're going to need to pump energy into
Even
it.
if it wouldn't, think of maintenance.
Yeah.
Something with no active components generally lasts longer and is
Mm,
cheaper.
I was just thinking we with the design that I'm going for, we're going to be running on an energy abundant, fingers crossed, energy abundant type
Maybe,
system.
maybe. I mean, that really depends on if it's well maintained. I can imagine you'll need to hire people to basically be human windscreen wipers on the mirrors. Speaking of the mirrors, though, there is a form of solar power that also involves a tower. Wow, I
Right.
rhymed.
Yeah.
um, where basically, I forget the name of the effect, but you basically, your tower is a giant hollow tube, and
Yes.
stretching out instead of mirrors, it takes up roughly the same surface area. You
Mhm.
basically have a sheet or anything like that, which could be see through. It doesn't have to be, but the idea is basically you have a lower air pressure at the top of the tube and a high air pressure at the bottom because of the temperature of the air,
Mhm.
and you basically get a wind tunnel just forcing up the tube
Yes.
naturally because you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
And at night, it goes the other way.
I've seen those, and they look really really interesting because, yeah, as you say, it's basically a turbine mounted on a pole,
Hmm.
in a tube.
Yeah.
Um.
And
I
the other advantage of that is now you use all that space as greenhouse.
Maybe, as I said, space isn't an issue. I mean, we would need to look into that, because these generation systems. Here we go. Blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
The figures it was kicking out. Yeah, one of these translates to 1,100 megawatts.
Hmm.
Do you want to say what that
Yes,
is? If that's is it me, or is that 1.1 gigawatts?
that is 1.1. Yes.
It's nearly 1.21 gigawatts. It's nearly enough for
Hmm.
time travel. So this thing is nearly
Yeah, I
the.
don't think this thing's going to be moving at 88 miles an hour though.
No, no, but that is a significant amount of power, and that's enough for, as it says there, 75,000 homes. That's
Hmm.
a good little town, or farming settlement, etc.
Hmm.
And you litter these down a long line, or a network across Africa or Australia, and you're starting to talk about some significant power generation, just just
Indeed.
just by being
Although,
sitting there and being pretty.
although there is one other thing to consider there, which is just because you're generating power, you can't just send it anywhere.
Oh, I know,
This is why I was suggesting, like,
I know,
yeah, space isn't an issue, but
I know.
if your irrigation system is right next to your power plant,
Yes, this is why I want
it's
to
more
build
efficient.
cities, and it would be a way of bringing. this is why I've named it "Make America, Make Africa, and Make Australia Great Again." If you did it in Africa, if you were going for, let's go back to the go through Libya route. In fairyland, that it's possible to go into Libya at the moment and start big industrial works without it turning into a complete nightmare. What you would be doing is you'd be building small clusters of towns all the way in. You'd first of all, there would be the engineers and the builders that would actually be making the things. They would set up the town. They would build the power station. The power station would then supply the works as they build the water irrigation system. Then you end up with a whole support industry wrapped around it. And wherever one of these towers crops up, you end up with a bunch of settlements that then branch out into your arable farming. You would be bringing not just hundreds or thousands. You would be bringing millions of jobs and
It's
wealth
a nice pipe dream.
back to Africa. And this is the great thing. You would then literally cause the idea of economic migration to be preposterous. Anybody that wants menial labour will be heading straight for that particular area. We'll end
Yes,
up with.
except a lot of what you've described requires skilled engineering
Yes, it
and
does, but
skilled farming.
there's an awful lot of bring a shovel. We need people to start digging work, and and yeah, but there's engineers and doctors coming in with these economic migrants. We've been told this countless times that these are fully qualified people.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Sorry, that I had to get a bit of edge out there.
Well, to bring things a bit more closer to the ground again. So, reverse desertification, is that not just simply an upside down cake?
Sorry, what? You're gonna have to explain the premise of what you mean by that.
Reverse desertification, an upside down cake.
It's an upside down cake, so you're just saying you end up with the desert underneath.
No, it was a bad pun. Forget it. There's a
Yes,
plain
it
word.
is.
It's
It's
desert,
oh
desert.
yes. Oh god. I can't believe I was so dense, Smith. Yes, it's a dessert. Yes. Ah ha ha. You know what? This is. I don't eat desserts. I rarely eat ice cream and cakes and stuff. I forget that
Well,
this.
that means you're part of the problem.
I am. I am. I
You need to eat more ice cream.
no. I just eat steak, steak and chicken and I take the skins and make sofas out of them. Well, no, I buy
Do,
sofas
do you
made out of
cook
them.
them atop a solar tower?
Oh, you know what? That would be hilarious.
Because that would offset the carbon footprint.
If I had a solar tower generating electricity, I would also have a very, very large metal pole that I could raise food up and just sort of wave around in there, bring it back down.
Well, I
Dinner's
mean,
ready.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is why this tech is actually pretty good. Is all you need is a couple parabolic mirrors.
Oh, parabolic mirrors are freaking awesome for this type of stuff. Yeah.
But the point is, they're not that expensive
That's what this
as
is
well.
basically. These big. That's exactly what that is. That is just a big
Yep.
parabolic mirror
Yep.
made up of little small mirrors, but that's all that is. But yes, did you see there was I saw James May had a show about weird inventions. I can't remember what channel it was on. Maybe it was on Prime or whatever. Um, and he interviewed some guys from California who had got a parabolic mirror set up with what looked like black box technology. It was it. I'm still dubious as to whether it's real, but the theory behind it was that it was using solar energy to crack apart molecules of essentially impurities in the air, carbon dioxide, dust, soot, etc. And it was just smashing them all together at a high height, a high temperature rather, and breaking them down to the basic carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, etc., spinning it
Hmm.
together and making petrol out of thin air. Now,
In principle,
I was going to say
yeah.
the
But
principle
the
is
the
there,
binding
but
energy. The thing is, the binding energy that you're breaking apart, like carbon and oxygen in the air, will naturally form carbon dioxide.
yes,
Um, I mean, yeah, in principle, you could do that. I have seen companies that effectively build plastic out of the air.
Yes,
They're not carbon. They actually cost more energy than
I
they
know,
get out
I
of it
know.
in
They're a
terms of
big publicity
the coal
stunt.
they burn to run their machines.
Yes, it's a massive publicity stunt, but it's nonetheless it's nice technology, and maybe one day they could be powered by a more
Yeah,
energy,
certainly.
carbon positive power
But
source.
this way, if we figure out fusion, we'll probably be using this as a form of air scrubbing.
If we, yeah, I was going to say, if we figure out fusion, we'll be looking at this go and think of it as an art project. Uh, because we won't need very many fusion reactors to power a
Hmm.
lot of stuff. Um, although our electricity bill will still go up, guarantee you.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to comment too much on that, but
Hmm.
I know where most of that cost comes from, and that's due to legacy code.
Legacy code. Interesting way of putting it.
Yes, people have written crap systems and then they've bolted on more stuff for about 20 years,
Yes.
all based upon regulations that were written in the Victorian era.
Yes. Yeah, it's like the
But
way the internet's run at the moment.
getting back onto this, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
okay,
Okay.
Africa is a tricky one because there are lots of countries involved, and sometimes those countries become other countries or
Or
split into two countries,
despotic
etc.
war zones, or complete
No,
anarchic
I'm
states.
not saying
Yes.
what causes it. I
Yes.
mean, it might just be the natural
It is fair to
cycle of a
say.
country's border. I mean,
It is definitely fair
but
to say, under the current system and way of things, that Africa as a continent is prone to somewhat civil unrest from time to time. I don't think
hmm,
anyone can
let's have a look at
deny that.
Australia.
Okay.
Take Australia as a use case because it's a single country. Therefore, getting a unified concerted effort is theoretically easier,
Okay.
and they are a rich country.
Yeah.
Mean, I think they're the number one exporter of uranium in the world.
Oh, would you like to see the uranium maps of Australia? They are
Another type of cake.
they are freely yeah, they're freely available maps. I'm not giving away any secrets or anything, but
But yeah, when you're looking for that, I think you also have to consider there's a question of why Australia, in and of itself, is, I believe, self-sufficient from a food point of view,
could be.
and they're not exactly desperate for more energy. So justifying building loads of new power plants, regardless of how they work, in a place very far away from any cities or places that need that power, it's going to be a tricky one to sell. You know, how will you pay for it? Is the ultimate question.
Well, with regards Australia has a long game to play here, as you say. As you can see on this map, Australia has got what you might call a lot of mineral wealth that no one really mentions a lot. It's got a lot of uranium, it's got a lot of opals, it's got a lot of oil, it's got a lot of all sorts of stuff buried under that gigantic hellish rock that is at the middle of Australia. And it's very, very unpleasant to live there, apparently. It is not nice. You have to live like Jawas from Star Wars and have houses underground so you can just deal with the heat. It's hot and it's radioactive in places and it's very, very wealthy. Now, if they can hold on to that mineral resource and use it as a trading good rather than use it as a power for themselves and have power generation by the massive abundance that they have because it's a hot ass country to say the least. They gain more power and wealth in the process. So there's a lot of reasons why they shouldn't just sit there and go, we're self-sustainable. Yes, they are. They're doubly
Hmm.
self-sustainable. They can be
Are you
self-sustainable and export uranium in a
are
big
you
way.
implying that they become the next world power?
I am implying that Australia has the untapped mineral wealth and landmass to definitely be a significant player on that field. I've run into various weird conspiracy theories about the the future of the world, etc. And the one world, the whole one island and two satellite island theories of one centralized main continent of the world, from Russia, China, all the way through to Europe and Africa, combining that as one landmass, and then looking at Australia and America as the two satellites, is the only way of it is a way of looking at the world as a lens. And even with that one, Australia is there as a powerhouse, massive one. It just
Hmm.
doesn't have the people there to
That's what I was
realise.
going to say. Is they lack the resource of
Yeah,
people.
they don't have the manpower yet. Australia managing their immigration in the way they do is actually a little bizarre. They could be building and growing at a vast
Well,
rate.
that's why they, I think, relaxed their immigration. They used to have a very strict immigration policy, but
Mm.
now they've basically scrapped it. But that's more of a separate conversation, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, no. The question is, like, look at Australia. They're not exactly a poor country.
No.
They could certainly afford to build anti-desert machines, as it were. Let's say the infrastructure where you start on the coast, you build your solar collectors, you
Hmm.
set them up with desalination pumps, pump the water up,
Yep.
and go bit by bit by bit by bit, all the way to Alice Spring or somewhere like that.
Sure.
Assuming the ground is flat enough, which I don't think it is all the way, but
Not all
say
the
it
way.
was.
No, they've got mountains, but it is a fairly flat land out there. But yeah.
But say it is. Then the question is, like, who's going to pay for it? Because it's not going to make money back. Piping,
No.
piping, no, transferring that electricity over cables that far to get to, say, Adelaide or Brisbane or any of the sea,
The
it's just going to
the the
not be viable.
the financial benefits of it are going to be a very difficult one to quantify. For a start, a large part of it is a humanitarian and
Hmm.
greater good, dare I say it, for the world, betterment type of thing. In that we'll be producing more oxygen,
Well,
creating
that's true.
creating more, sort of lungs for the earth, so that all the people on it can keep breathing and living off the oxygen that we so richly need, whilst industry cuts down these rainforests that we really
1,000 years
shouldn't
from
be.
now in the future, people are like, cut down trees. We've got too much oxygen. It's turned toxic.
Well, maybe that would be great. Fine.
But here's the
Well, I'll
thing.
have wood burning
Like,
stoves. It would be glorious.
I could be wrong about this, but I believe Australia is too far away from the equator to be a launching platform for rocketry, like for
um,
like SpaceX and such.
I'm not totally sure about that. We can find out. Um,
Because you think about it, otherwise, why not build a Cape Canaveral on the west coast of Australia? Unless it has to be on the east coast of a landmass because of the spin of the Earth. I actually don't know that, but yeah, that would be industry that would require you to start building up infrastructure.
list of rocket sites. Wikipedia. Algeria,
Yeah.
Congo, Egypt, Kenya, Libya, Mauritania, South Africa, China, 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 India, 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 Indonesia, Iran, 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 Israel, Japan, 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 Kakistan. Oh, sorry, Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan. Oops. Kyrgyzstan. Christ, kill me.
Oh god.
North Korea, South Korea, Maldives, Pakistan, Russia, Taiwan, France,
Do you think
Germany,
Australia
Italy,
certainly could
Norway.
afford to have a space program?
It could afford it. I don't think it's a viable launch point, as far as I can tell
Then
from
again,
here.
South Africa was on that list, wasn't it?
South Africa, Overberg South African Test Centre. So perhaps.
Okay. It might be, in the end of the day, it might be right in assuming you only launch rockets off the east coast, so that way you're always over water.
There is a lot to be said for that, but they launch rockets from Kazakhstan, which is
Yes, but what's east of
somewhat landlocked.
Kazakhstan?
God, Mongolia or something. Or Kazakhstan.
Mm,
Kazakhstan's
yes, if you
freaking
go east enough,
huge.
yes, but I think you'll find there's China and Russia in the way.
Yeah, it's just vast amounts of landmass, empty,
Yeah,
largely empty
empty landmass,
landmass.
which is why the Russians launch over west of Siberia.
Hmm.
Um, there might be that's just not an area of rocketry I know enough about. I guess.
I
But
know far too little about rocketry for my own likings. I would love to know how to build proper rockets, but
hmm,
I know the principles.
I mean,
Um,
I do know that you can't build, for example, if we had the materials, we wouldn't be able to build a space lift as south as Australia. You have to be within 30 degrees of the equator.
oh god, yeah, no, a space elevator has to be pretty much on the equator, ideally, because it's shortest distance
Hmm.
and all that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a tangent, but I was brainstorming from the point of view of like what industries could you put there?
Well, in Australia, no,
Uh,
there's
in the northeast of Australia, in
I mean,
particular,
there's clearly a lot of mining and sort of
northwest, west. Sorry.
mining and refining in associated industries that could go in there, but it's massive open space.
Hmm.
It's land that similar land in Australia, elsewhere where it isn't set desert, is being used to great effect for vineyards. So wine would be a good one, and various other foodstuffs. It's got the potential if you can get a ground soil down there that's decent. Yeah, it's got the potential to be anything like. It's
Hmm.
glorious weather potentially if you
Right,
can
no, the other side of this, though, is I suppose more of an ethics question. Is like, is it
shoot
right
me.
to do this from the point of view that you take it any square of desert in the world of significant size, and you'll find there's a lot of national parks in it,
Oh, I know, I know.
which,
Is it right
which
to do this?
implies that this.
Was it right to build the Hoover Dam? Was it right to dig the Suez Canal? There's been an awful lot of big engineering works that an awful lot of people have said, was it right to do it? And
Hmm.
you know what? They're right to second guess it, but
Yeah.
people occasionally need to have a vision and follow it through. As
What if that vision extincts like hundreds of species? I mean, one of the problems people often talking about is our biodiversity is going down on the
yeah,
planet.
yeah. Now this is absolutely. I mean, by what I'm trying to do, the whole aim of it is to return life to an area that is relatively less teeming with life
Hmm.
than it could be.
But no, I think you've missed there
But no, I
because
know, I know what you're
teeming with
saying.
life is
I know
not
what you're saying. If
diversity.
just more rats and mice and birds doesn't mean it doesn't. You've just lost a whole bunch of species. You're
Hmm.
right. Um,
And there's two sides to that. One is, the old don't cut down the rainforest. You might find the cure to something in there.
yeah,
Well, you might find the cure in a cactus in the Sahara.
I quite
Uh,
agree. I quite agree. And as it was, yeah, you would want to um,
and
respect
do
local
we
biodiversity and try and
need
promote local biodiversity rather than. I mean, the last thing you'd want to do is pick up a
turn
whole bunch.
everything into more of England?
Yeah, Australia would blow a fuse if you picked up a whole bunch of European plants and started sticking them all over the place in Australia. They've had all sorts of problems with
Well,
that
I
type
mean,
of
you
stuff.
say that, but
No, no,
the
no.
Australians did that
I was
themselves.
going to say they did that themselves. They had all sorts of problems. I mean, the cane toad problem they have in Australia is unbelievable because they brought cane toads over. They got over there. They bred like crazy. Hippies started licking the backs of them and tripping, and more importantly, road users started driving over the backs of them and sliding all over the road on the gooey sludge that they made out of it because these bastards are there in huge million swarms of them that they just coat the road and you're driving along and apparently you just
A bit like that.
goo.
Where was it? I think it's in South America, where basically you get loads of crabs that basically normally live in the ocean, but they spawn in the jungle. So they literally coat the entire coastal roads.
Mm, mm. There's a lot of stuff like that, and so yeah, you would absolutely have a bunch of greenies and hippies in there going right. Well, we want this plant and this plant and this plant to help it. without a doubt, you're doing this with helping the world in mind. You're not going to just charge in there and go, right, I'm going to make Africa great again. Bring in the bulldozers, lads. We're digging it up. There'll be a huge amount of that, but you also want people there going, okay, well, we need to make sure that those plants over there are part of the growth pattern because they're only found here. We need to make sure that 20% of the crop is that type of
I
plant or
mean,
something.
it's a funny world, that one. I remember
It's
seeing a documentary not long ago about this plant that basically crossbred with another plant, and basically completely covered an entire area of swampland.
yeah.
I think it's in
Was
Florida.
this like a blue-green algae kind of deal?
No, no, well, I suppose, but it's not quite. It's basically it crossbred with it's a type of grass,
Right.
and the funny thing
Oh.
about it is this thing is thicker and more robust than the native plants, so it's out competing.
Yeah.
But
Well,
in so doing, this plant has provided better protection to endangered species of birds.
cool.
So now you've got
Well,
this
that
equality of
sounds to me like evolution winning once again, in the only
but
way it knows how. Um, but yeah, I mean, what we're proposing here is it's not even $1 billion. This is trillions of dollars that are needed to go into this. This is
hmm,
millions of jobs. This is wealth creation for huge numbers of people, and it would
but
need
you
to be.
need a reason to seed it.
Oh, yeah,
What's
I mean, I would need to get. You'd need Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. You'd need all of the big tech
Musk,
giants, Musk, everyone,
Dyson,
yeah, everyone with a few quid to rub together, and that's busy building cities and stuff like that. Then you need them all in on it, and then you need all the countries of the world in on it as well, and you have to be a massive international effort. And therein lies your problem because the moment that happens, they all just argue and bicker for 20 years and nothing gets done. Huge amounts of
and
money
then
get
and
spent.
well, not even for 20 years. It'll be quick now. It
Mm.
will last the term of the longest term of office of the countries involved.
So yeah. So
Because you're not going to win an election campaign on
what
this.
we need here really is someone to go, Trigger, that's an absolutely fantastic idea. Here's a massive chunk of money. You can project manage it, and then what I'll do is find all of the best project managers in the world and hire them and get it done.
And knowing you, it will just turn into fields upon fields of hemp.
It's a very fast-growing plant. It will be a very very good way of replacing the topsoil on there. I will have no other insinuations about that. Thank you very much.
If you really want a fast growing plant,
hmm
rhubarb.
Rhubarb. Actually, you're absolutely right. Rhubarb's fantastic, but rhubarb only grows at night.
That's not actually true.
Well, it's kind of
Rhubarb that's
it's
dehydrated grows faster in the dark.
it's yeah. I was watching a thing about rhubarb. And how they grow it, and they grow it in a perpetual state of dusk in these rooms, and you can hear the damn stuff creaking as it grows. It
You
grows at
can
about an
see it
inch.
grow.
Yeah,
It,
it's like an inch an hour or
but
something.
that you could argue that's cruel
Um,
if you were of that mindset, because you're basically putting it on the edge of dying from dehydration, which is why it's going through this
yes,
manic growth
yes,
spurt.
you're forcing it into a tortured state, and in doing so, it is producing the maximum yield possible. Um, if if it was a sentient creature with a brain and was screaming and writhing in agony, I might look at it and frown. But it's rhubarb, dude. Don't care
It
about
is rhubarb,
veggies'
dude.
feelings. It's
You can hear it creaking in pain.
yes. Vegans, feel free to at me. Bring it on. Okay,
Well, hang on. Vegans have no platform to stand on.
I know.
They
Vegans
eat the stuff.
vegans are bonkers. Oh, don't start me on vegans. I shouldn't have
Well,
mentioned
that's
vegans.
another conversation, though. But
Vegans are pro
coming back
genocide
to
of animals.
this, yeah, what would your plan be for getting the water? Would you take it from the ocean, or would you pump it from somewhere else in the world where it's fresh?
Largely because of the power and the way we're using the power, we've got in generating vast amounts of heat is a byproduct of generating the power. It struck me that we could desalinize ocean water fairly easily. Um,
Hmm.
But as always with these things, this is just an elevator pitch for the idea of what I think we might have as an idea. I'm more than happy to. Well, we've got a natural spring over here. Will this do? Yes. Shit, yeah.
Well, no,
Although,
not really,
no,
because
it
otherwise
yeah,
Australia wouldn't be a desert.
yeah. I was going to say, there's the yes, but there's irrigation at that point. But it's all part of a bigger works, and yes, I think you would need a resource like the ocean to tap into.
But not the Med, because the Med is actually water negative.
Yeah, I
Water
know,
flows into it from the Atlantic because not enough comes in from rivers.
I know, I know. It's
But yeah, I
an
mean,
issue.
here's the thing with desalination. So the sun is a natural desalinator of water. Not very efficient one, mind
Well,
you.
no, the sun vaporizes water, and the concentration of salt in the water technically gets higher at that point. But when the if you can then get
No, no,
that water
you
to
misunderstood.
condense, what?
Basically, sunlight energizes water, which causes it to unbind the hydrogen bonds with the substrate,
Is
in this
that a
case, salt.
is that a larger effect than the concentrating effect that it has as it's vaporizing it?
From what I understand, yes, actually.
Oh,
It's just why people say the sun is a natural desalinator.
I
Having
know.
said that, artificial desalination is about 1,000 times more
I was
efficient,
going to say, yeah.
and certain stuff I've seen in recent years, where you basically take, I suppose you call it a nanofiber cloth, where the gaps are fine enough that the water can get through, but nothing else can.
Hmm.
Effectively, gives you completely, you know, what's the word? Not partial, basically non-active desalination. I can't think of the word I want to use, but whatever.
Oh. So it's Oh God, why is my biology so terrible at this sort of stuff? But yes, it's
Osmosis?
osmosis, isn't it? Is it osmosis that's going off there?
Not
It's
quite.
reverse osmosis.
Sorry.
It's a reverse osmosis pump.
Reverse osmosis requires active energy input
Okay.
because you're going against the water concentration gradient.
Yeah,
Now,
that's right.
this is a case of you have right. You understand what salty water is made of. It's just a load of little bits and pieces of various molecules, right?
Yeah.
But
Various.
you have a membrane
Hmm.
that is small enough for water to get through, but not for salt to get through because sodium
Oh
chloride is bigger than
fuck.
water.
Okay. Yeah. So literally a molecular sieve.
Literally a molecular sieve, yeah. And we've been able to do this like in the lab for a long time, but some stuff I've seen of late is promising on the side of mass producing.
I was going to say because a
Now we're
molecular
not there
sieve, a
yet.
molecular sieve is not a fast system. It's not like
Doesn't have to be
you
when
could pour it in.
when you put it in the mouth of a canal that connects to the ocean and is lower than the ocean. You put it this way: after they built the Hilver Dam, filling up the lake behind it was not a fast process. But it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't
You've got so
matter.
much water coming in. And more to the point, it effectively requires no energy input and very little maintenance from us once it's going.
Oh yeah, it's just a piece of material that does what it's designed to do, and unless that
Yeah,
changes in
you'll
some
have
way,
you would have
unless
to
it
scrub it
breaks
every
down,
so often so it doesn't get completely encrusted with salt. But
which it will.
yeah,
But you could possibly have that automated. You could possibly have it on literally on a roll, so it's just rolling,
yeah.
and
Or
the
you could
the
just
gradient
take
change
certain
will just make.
bacteria cultures and let them eat the salt.
It's an interesting idea.
Again, the bacteria won't fit through the holes either.
Yeah, that's
I
trippy,
do
dude.
feel like it's important to mention that doing this does have one negative,
Okay.
though very minor,
Mhm.
which is every time you take energy out of the ocean, you're effectively slowly causing the moon to crash into the Earth.
Because oh my god, are you sure? Because
Yeah, completely.
I know, I
What
know,
causes
I
what
know,
causes the tides?
I know the drag. I know the drag effects, but if we were removing water, aren't we lessening the drag? Aren't we potentially having the
If
moon?
you're taking, if you well, what drives this would be tidal forces.
Yeah, but isn't the moon more likely
Every
to just
time you
bugger off
pull,
into space than crash
eh?
in? If we were adding
No,
more water,
every time you pull tidal energy out of the system, you're
oh
reducing the amount of
crap!
energy in the moon's orbit.
You're right. You're basically increasing the drag on the moon.
Which, in a way, this is a more good because the moon right now is on a slow trajectory out of
Outwards.
orbit.
Ooh.
So conservation.
So this is a fine tuning method to preserving the moon in its current position. Oh.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
this
effectively.
is wins all round, isn't it?
I mean, you could, if you want to really go a bit nutty on this, you
Mm-hmm.
could actually go for some sort of massive, like, system of tidal generators, not generators, but power plants.
What?
That
So
are
what?
powered off tidal system. Turn them all on at once to bring the moon closer for a flyby, so you could send stuff up there, and then turn them all off again and put them in reverse to pump energy back into the system to send the moon back where it came from.
Oh, that's.
It,
You
it
titled.
won't work.
No, no.
Before you start thinking it would just not work, you
No. I was going to say it takes too long and so on.
and even if it didn't, the moon would be ripped apart.
I was stuck on the tidal generators because suddenly I just had long snakes of piezoelectric material in my head with little
Yeah,
paddles at different angles, so
I
that
was
they
just
could
thinking of
pick it up
lots
and
of turbines, but
yeah,
okay.
no, turbines are good, but piezoelectrics, well, things with turbine barrages, it can cause problems for the wildlife that gets sucked through the turbine barrage.
Hmm.
But a big piezoelectric snake with little different sized paddles on it all the way around would sort of thrash itself around in a tidal current
Hmm.
and generate. I don't know. I don't know how you gather piezoelectrics. The only time I've ever seen it used usefully
You'll
on
have
a
to remind me what it is. I've had.
piezoelectrics. You know when you get a lighter and you push it down and it's the pressure of your thumb on the button, yeah, is squeezing a crystal and you get a spark.
I did not know that, but okay.
Right, and that's how most little electric lighters work. They've got a little piezoelectric crystal, and you compressing it
Quite
compresses the
like a
crystal.
crystal radio.
Yeah, piezoelectrics. I'm surprised you don't know piezoelectrics, dude.
No, I know the phrase. It's just
It's
when you know so much stuff, the brain sieves a bit.
yeah, it's I think it's an effect with quartz or something. I don't
Oh god, don't stop talking about crystal healing.
no.
um, but while you're looking that up, just say tidal power. You don't actually put the turbine in the water. What you do is you put a big empty cylinder in the water, and when a tide comes in, it pushes the air up into a turbine.
Hmm. There you go.
So
Piezoelectricity is the
the
electric
wildlife
charge
wouldn't
that
eat you for
accumulates
bread.
in certain solid materials as crystals in certain ceramics and bone in response to applied mechanical stress. So basically, it's a
Uh,
type of crystals or structures that when you put mechanical stress on it, it interprets that mechanical stress into an electrical shock or electrical charge.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
Now, I've always been interested in piezoelectrics.
And what
For
you
for
want to use the force of a tide hitting it to make it kind of jump electrically.
Yeah, no, basically you just have a long snake-like sort of material that's just essentially a series of batteries uh, that are rigid, and then a piezoelectric hinge in between them. and
Oh, right.
and then you'd have little paddles that are all of different sizes, so the tide affects different areas at different ways to create mechanical stress and forces on the joints. And then the moment that stress is forced into the joint, that creates a charge that gets pushed into the battery, charges the battery, and then you have a power drain straight out of it into the electrical grid or whatever type system.
Interesting. I wonder if the opposite is also true. Like, if you pass electricity through it, does it just expand and then explode?
I'm not sure whether
Because
the opposite is
most
true.
systems with electricity generation are reversible.
It's a good point. Well, lead
It's
zirconate. Well, okay, find some lead zirconate titanate crystals and
hmm,
whack a charge of electricity through them and see if they pop. I've got a feeling you might be right. I've got a feeling they might go. They might um,
well up and then explode.
swell and explode, or tear themselves apart from a mechanical stress
Yeah,
fracture.
through an edge defect or something.
Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
but I was looking at them as a kid and thinking, why don't we make masts on sail ships with piezoelectrics in them? Because and maybe even on the
Or
sail,
weave them into the sails.
you weave it into the sails and the mast, so the strain of the wind hitting the mast would allow for a creaking effect to gain a charge and just power your battery up in your boat that way. Maybe
Probably
you can
wouldn't
run a
give you
small
that
motor.
much energy.
It would give
Uh,
you enough for a radio. It would give you enough for a few other bits and bobs. I don't know if if running all day charging up a battery, maybe it would give you enough to run a stove. I don't know, but
well, I mean,
it's
here's the other thing you could do with that, though, is just put a cable up and down your mast. And as your boat moves across field lines, it induces an electrical charge along the cable.
yeah. I mean, there's a number of ways of generating electricity when you've got a large mast and you're traveling over water at a speed. Uh, there's got to be all sorts of Van de Graaff type effects you can use to generate electricity. I mean, there's that whole St Elmo's fire business that happens in certain
Ball
weather
lightning.
conditions. It's St Elmo's fire it was a thing that afflicted sailboats where they would be sailing along at night into certain weather conditions, and the sails would start bioluminescing and sparkling, and it was basically them picking up an electrical charge, if I
Ah,
remember rightly.
oh, so not ball lightning then.
Might be, might I don't know. Let's have a see if Wikipedia can answer this. We've gone off topic completely, but I'm quite enjoying this at the moment. Uh,
Oh,
so,
before you go off, I just noticed natural material that is susceptible to piezoelectricity, bone.
yes,
So if you squeeze someone's arm hard enough, they get electrocuted.
yes, slightly. It's interesting, but here we go. St Elmo's fire is a weather phenomenon in which luminescent plasma is created by coronal discharge from a sharp or pointed object in a strong electric field in the atmosphere, such as those generated by thunderstorms or created during volcanic eruptions at sea. Yeah, it used to happen on the masts and sails.
Interesting.
They'd get like a plasma build up, but there's so much energy going off in a sailboat. Uh, there's yeah,
Hmm. By the way, coming back to something I said earlier,
sure.
using a sailboat effectively also causes the moon to crash into the Earth
For the same reason,
for the same reason.
sort of. I think you'd need to do a lot more than that.
Of course, dude.
you it would need
It's
to be a
minuscule.
it would need to be a sodding big ass sailboat. I mean, the Titanic was a good effort at a big boat. It would need to be a lot bigger than that and have a lot more sails to even have a measurable effect. And even then, I don't know if you'd measure it.
Hmm.
It would
But
definitely
no,
be
it's
there.
just an interesting thing to think about. Is any renewable energy source that we use, other than geothermal and solar, is basically us harvesting the kinetic energy of the moon.
Largely, largely. I'm sure. Let's see if anyone is actually watching this and if anyone's reeing. No. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, no, you're absolutely right. A lot of it is if it's not photonic or geothermal, as you say,
Hmm.
it's coming from the tides, and that's the moon.
Well,
Uh,
here's another one for you. Solar power, right, always involves reflecting light,
it
right?
does, yes.
Right. So if you reflect light rather than absorb it,
Oh no, I was going to say
every time you build a
photovoltaic.
solar panel and use it, you're effectively pushing the Earth away from the sun.
With that ultra light speed powered jet you're creating.
Well, the Earth is being pushed away from the sun anyway
By
from
that
solar wind.
gigantic solar radiation, like yes, there's a bit of it, a bit of that. But at the same time, if we collect any mass whatsoever, we start to pull towards the sun. Which we're collecting mass all the time from just bits of debris and stuff landing on us. So that probably kind of evens out a bit. I don't think
Here's the question.
we have to worry about that one just yet.
We take all the stuff we've been talking about in terms of reversing desertification.
Okay.
Could we apply that in space, like on other planets?
Any discovery we make in engineering, bioengineering, terraforming, etc., may well be applicable to other environments. Certainly, but I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're trying to build space stations in the clouds of Venus or terraform Mars, we need to unlock a lot of water on Mars first. And no, Venus, we ain't doing anything on the ground with irrigation at all. Maybe we could make floating solar plants in amongst the clouds of Venus.
Oh, you'd be better off putting them in orbit around Venus and just microwaving them down.
You're absolutely right. I was almost literally took the words from my mouth there. There would be far better ways. I still like the idea of floating a space station in the clouds of Venus.
It's not technically a space station if it's floating.
No, it wouldn't be. It would be, but
it would be an airship.
It would be an airship. But it would be way off.
It would be the Hindenburg.
It would be way up in the atmosphere. You could set it so you'd got Earth-like atmospheric issues.
Yes, yes.
Conditions.
You have the atmospheric pressure of Earth, but the atmospheric composition of your stomach.
Well, then all you need to do is basically make a plastic, non-corrosive environment, and then create a positive pressure environment inside it with breathable air, and you're all good.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true.
And it would just sit there floating around in the clouds. You'd have a great view out the window. It'd be like Lando's space station in Empire.
Again, not a space station. That Lando's wasn't even floating. I believe it had an active support tower structure.
Oh, it did have one big pole, didn't it?
Yeah, which, if you as I say, if it was active support, you could do that. Just means if you had a power cut, the whole thing would crumple down under its own weight.
Yeah, no, I just like, I've always liked Buckminster Fuller's idea of making gigantic geodesic domes, sticking a city in it, and having the people in there and the industry that they're doing.
Is this your fart spheres?
Yeah, no, yeah, well, it's not farts, but it's basically the heat of everyone in the city in the dome, and going about their business makes the temperature and pressure inside the sphere buoyant, and you could have a city floating inside a gigantic glass bubble. I mean, we're talking,
fart spheres.
Yeah, we're talking many, 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 many miles in diameter.
I think
spheres.
It's a really bad idea to have something as large as a building be mobile.
As large as a building, dude. This is bigger than a city.
Yeah. I'm saying let's start with a building before we go.
No. We're talking about we're ripping up London. We're sticking London basically on a central plane, building a big fucking bubble around it, and then letting it fly around and float.
That sounds like a terrible idea.
I think
I'll put it this way: even if you were able to do it,
can we just do it to bits? Can we just do it to bits of London?
Imagine, right? Someone doesn't like England.
Yeah.
So you know what? They launch a missile at this thing. You pierce the shell, and it deflates like a balloon, whilst zipping around all over the atmosphere. Probably landing somewhere in northwest Australia.
There are definitely some issues with Buckminster Fuller. This is Bucky Fuller. This is not my idea. This is Buckminster Fuller. The guy was a genius, but he was a bit wacky, and I love the guy. We're talking about the guy that, the fullerene, the C60 carbon atom is named after him. He designed that thing. He was a significant genius, but some of his other ideas were a bit wacky, and I happen to like a lot of them. Um,
I think that says more about you than him.
oh, he had the Dynamax house. He designed a house, and I'll see if I can find it because I love this design. The walls move. So basically, you wake up in your bedroom, and you get up and you go to your wardrobe and you get dressed after you're taking a shower, and then you open your door, and you then slide the whole wall back so the whole bedroom folds in on itself, and then you've walked into your kitchen, which is nice and open and a big spacious kitchen, and go cook yourself some breakfast, and then you slide the wall back there and walk into the now gigantic spacious living room that you've created for yourself, because it all rotates
Honestly,
around a
this
central.
just is starting to sound like a house Wallace and Gromit would design.
It's a bit like that, but there was some interesting aerodynamics to it as well. And basically, there were no right angle surfaces at floor level. Everything was slightly curved, and the aerodynamics of it were that the air blew in and had a gentle flow down from ceiling to floor, and it had a slight gap at certain points where the air would be literally being blown towards, and it literally cleans and dusts itself. This house does. It pulls all dust in the air straight down through the floor out the vents.
You try that and see if it works.
He did it. The Dynamax house is a real thing.
And it's still not dusty.
Here we go. Oh, let's find you for it. Uh, fucking hands. Excuse my language, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. This is one of my favourite inventions of all time. Let's see if we can find a Dymaxian house. There we go. Now this is an ugly picture of it.
Well, I've got to wait for the stream to catch up.
See if you can get the stream to catch up there. You got that?
Nope. You just started typing into the search.
Oh, okay. So as you can see, people watching, it was basically a dome-shaped one-story building was the initial idea. He made it out of aluminium and stainless steel because he thought that was the future. And yeah, the whole thing rotates. Basically, the walls rotate around a central column where the aerodynamics are involved for blowing and sucking air through. And yes, you can just collapse the rooms in on themselves via the walls, and so whatever room you're in is the main living space in the house. And so yeah, you want to run through from the living room to the bedroom. Might just be a case of grabbing hold of two walls and giving them a good pull, and they'll slide round you, and then your bedroom will open up. I think it's quite clever, and they used that idea or similar sort of variants on it in a couple of sci-fi movies. I think the Fifth Element.
I see a problem.
Oh, there's many. For a start, it's
What if
fucking
someone's
ugly.
in the kitchen when you squish it down?
Well, you are wary of your other people in the house, obviously. But there's whole issues, many issues. This never took off. It was unfortunately part of the downfall of him. He got this this theory of dynamic tension and Dymaxian, as he put it, systems were they were very clever. He had a Dymaxian car as well that basically was extraordinarily fuel efficient, which was immediately sat on by Henry Ford, and no one's actually. I don't think I've seen a full design of that vehicle. But he was a visionary. He was an engineering and chemical engineering visionary, and had some fantastic ideas. Certainly, yeah. In the look of it and styling, it could have done with some marketing people getting involved. But I still like the principle of it. I've got a little house, and I'm in a tiny room of it, and I've got all of these other rooms that are currently not using. Wouldn't it be great if I could just, give the walls a bit of a push and then make the total use of the space that I'm in? I kind of like the idea. It's potty and romantic and definitely.
I can help you with that. Let me get my sledgehammer.
Yeah, no thanks. I don't want to structurally damage my house in the process. And the idea of a house that does all of its own hoovering and cleaning by simple dint of the aerodynamics in there, oh, that's just downright clever. It's just a pity it looked so freaking ugly. But there you go. We've gotten properly off topic now. We're now talking about Buckminster
Yes,
Fuller.
yes.
Um, but he had vision, that man, and he inspired many, many dreams of mine as a child, drawing floating cities in the clouds. And
So, would you or would you not encourage us to have genetically engineered plants in your newly reclaimed desert?
oh, as I said, I would want to actually make sure that the local flora and fauna is respected and promoted back. That which
Well,
is,
what if it's all died out?
well, that I was going to say, if it's all dead, if it is literally just a barren dust bowl there, then the impact
Keep in
of,
mind, keep
sorry,
in mind, anything that's not dead would have adapted to it now,
yeah,
so you can't exactly reintroduce it to your
yeah.
Gaia land.
Yes, precisely. There would probably be a lot of benefits to doing GM because of um, the way I mean, it would depend on the route we went in, for creating the topsoil, etc. Are we creating artificial palm trees and hemp and flax type sort of thing, which is going to just need to plow itself over and will take 50 years before it's
Hmm.
usable as arable land.
Probably
Um,
wouldn't take that long if you used nano clay.
no, probably not.
It just as a way to make the sand stick together.
Yeah, but I mean, there's all sorts of things we can add. But if we're going down the greenhouse route, we can go to crops immediately.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a good route with regards actually making the area around it green and pleasant, or whether it would just end up being lots of greenhouses in a desert.
If you were to greenhouse over, remember, if you greenhouse over but you don't grow it in pots, you grow it on the ground,
Hmm.
you are effectively creating topsoil long term.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. And if you were building Eden Project like domes instead of poxy little sort of, uh, you know, my next door neighbour's 250 quid aluminium
No,
greenhouse.
I don't think
Uh,
we'll be using IKEA greenhouses for these. I think
exactly. So I'm sort of thinking big ass domes where you've got an entire valley under a dome kind of thing. Then maybe because you can do all sorts of shit in that case.
hmm,
And I quite like that idea of biodomes all over the place. Although, just mentioning that word makes me remember the horrifying Kylie Minogue film Biodome, which I had the
we don't
misfortune of
talk about that.
watching that. Seriously, anyone that watches this, if you've never seen Biodome, watch it. Watch it once,
Mm.
and then you will have a reason to hate me.
Here's a thing, Trig. Like one thing you can say without a shadow of a doubt is
Hmm.
if you want to make a country rich, make it sell food to other countries.
Precisely. This is
Right?
this is this is
Now,
I,
if you
I
just look at the Sahara alone, the landmass there, if you greenhouse like 80% of it, could easily supply like probably 5 times the amount of our global food output.
It could certainly transport food. But let's put it this way: if you had African nations starving at that point, yeah, they couldn't say it's because of transportation. It would be neglect at that point. There would be so much food so nearby. Yeah, you would be saving millions of lives potentially. Because I mean, the
Or just making corrupted leaders very, very rich.
well, that's a whole other issue, isn't it, with Africa?
I didn't say anything about Africa.
Don't know how to deal with corrupt warlords leading countries in Africa. Well, I've got a couple of ideas, but I'm not saying them on a live stream.
Well, they
Uh,
wouldn't be warlords, dude. They'd be farm lords.
yes,
Get it right.
yes, and you know what? I think it would be much nicer. I think the idea of people like Mugabe and those types of and Idi Amins of the world getting into actually providing food and life to an area rather than breeding in death and just mutilating and killing, then maybe that's the way forward. I mean, is not the history of Europe and the West the fact that we became farmers hardcore for a good long time? Is
Ah,
that
sorry about that.
is it? Sorry, I was going to say, is not the fact that we in the West were farmers for many, many, many thousands of years what made us a lot more civilized than I don't know. Was that a
Well,
civilizing factor
farming
of
farming
humanity?
turned us from nomads who had to eke out an existence every day of our life to
Yeah,
basically having half a year of doing nothing but thinking and drinking.
exactly. And I look at Africa and we have nomadic tribes. Africa, North Africa, is full of tribe or tribal history of nomadic peoples.
And South Africa.
South Africa, the whole of Africa in the whole has been largely nomadic peoples
Hmm.
striving to eke a living out of the land.
Although, in the case of, at least in the southern sub-Sahara
Hmm.
areas, the reason they never settled down and stayed nomadic is because they had so much available to them
I know.
that they literally could just pick the
Oh,
food off the
oh,
trees.
I know. Don't even start with me about the people of Africa have literally been walking around with diamonds sticking between their toes and being able to pluck food off the trees, and whether or not that has actually stopped that continent from developing in the same
Um,
way that other continents did because it was so rich and abundant, maybe for the
there
early
is
part.
something to be said about humanity rising to the challenge when
Mm,
calamity hits.
mm.
I mean,
But I mean,
look at
certainly,
the world
certainly
wars.
Africa's had it a bit shit for the last 1,000 years, but we're talking about much, much longer periods of time than that. Um, and
I mean, put it this way: Africa is what founded the first empire, really. When you think about it, if you consider Egypt as an empire.
I would consider Egypt as an empire. But when you say Egypt as an empire, the Egyptian Empire in the time of pharaohs very rapidly sort of you start work trying to sort of work out whether or not they were Africans or Greeks. Because Ramesses,
Well, I'm looking at
etc.
it from a geographic position, not a.
But yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. I I would say the Mediterranean area in general, be it North Africa, be it sort of where Turkey is now, or Greece, or what used to be the glory of Rome, which is now Italy, etc., has been the boiling pot for humanity for many, many, many thousands of years. There's now arguments whether Hungary and that sort of area, or whether it was the Caucasians, or whether it was Africa, was the birthplace of man. But either way, it all seems to stem around what is classically the cradle of life, which is the Gulf region of Africa, uh, spreading up into the Mediterranean. That sort of whole area, the classic, classic Empire of Alexander, essentially, um,
Hmm.
has done an awful lot of performing. That said, China, of course, can't forget China number one, has been sat there a bit distant from that, and China and Japan and India had a slightly different progression route that I'm a lot less familiar with. But certainly they developed themselves very, very well as well. I mean, the Japanese and Chinese, were it not for them not creating
Well, to a
glass,
point, they
I
they
th-
had resource issues.
was going to say
which is why much of China is empty.
they had bad steel and no one invented glass, and they're not inventing
That's not
glass.
true.
Oh, it took
No,
ages to invent
that's
glass.
not true. They did have good steel. The
Yes,
problem was it was all up in the mountains, far from the coast.
not the Japanese. The Japanese had
Oh, the
lousy steel.
Japanese. Yeah,
They
no, I
had
meant China.
lousy steel. All these people, oh, the katana is the best sword. No, the reason the katana was folded that many times was because it was the steel was so crap that it had to be built that way. Otherwise, they just snapped.
Right, it's how you get rid of impurities is you
Yeah,
fold it.
fold it, pattern weld it, and
In fact, if you took the
harden it.
Japanese folding technique and used it with modern steel, you'd get a substandard sword because you'd be removing the impurities that actually give it its steel-like properties. You'd
Yeah,
effectively turning it back into iron.
yeah, you could. You can certainly overwork steel, and we've got metals now, alloys, steel alloys, and so on, that could make swords that would be so much better than a classic Japanese steel blade. Certainly wouldn't have the heritage and so on, but it could be built to all of the specifications, be harder in the right place, be less brittle, more durable, probably more resistant to rust and corrosion as well, and much easier to maintain. And you could probably make them fairly quickly and easily as well, rather than have some swordmaster sitting there slaving away for half a year, or however long it takes them.
Indeed.
Yes.
But
We've
making swords will not bring back the rainforests.
no, making swords will not bring back the rainforests. You're right. Um, End of the day, is it a good idea? Are we going to create more harm than good? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of evidence and there's a lot of people working at the UN level and below, all the way down. There are people soaking billions, if not trillions, into reversing the desertification. I noticed actually, I was looking at that article. I was saying, the 2,500
Hmm.
kilometers a year.
Hmm.
That is an updated figure. Previously, it was a lot more, and we've actually managed to
Yeah.
reverse
How
a
much of
fair
that
amount.
is just like from things dying out too close to the edge of the desert, and how much is it humans building roads and cutting down trees?
I don't have those figures, but it's definitely a little column A, a little column B. Um, if we can reverse a bit of it on either side, it's a help.
Hmm. I think ultimately what we want to do is just try and get to a status quo position of we want X percentage of the Earth to have desert, and we just kind of contain it there.
To a degree, but also alongside that, I want areas of large natural resource where there is large amounts of space and no bugger in it. Yeah, I want people
Yeah.
to go and spread out a bit into those areas. I want I want to make Africa great again. I want people to want to live in Africa. I
Yes,
want
but
people
great
to
for who?
whoever's there.
Yes. The thing is, now we're getting into politics.
And that's the problem. But there are so many.
Can I offer an alternative?
Sure.
Giant floating cities, but principally for farming.
Giant floating cities. Are we back to my buckyball floating cities?
No, no, on the water, in the ocean,
Oh,
Lila. In the middle of the Atlantic, you basically have a mobile floating city with a deep trailing, what do you call them, like jellyfish tendrils,
yeah,
with lights attached that creates basically a life under the city that you then farm.
bioluminescence. It's interesting. I
Well,
mean,
it's not
the,
bio at all. It's
the
completely artificial.
I think it was the Mayans or the Aztecs had huge reed mats in the Amazon Delta that they would grow agriculture on.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah,
And,
if you want a lot of space filled up,
yeah.
just do it over the ocean.
So I mean, there is a lot. There is a lot to be said for building, essentially floating farmland in a freshwater delta into an ocean. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It's a really good idea. Um,
Add to that, you know, if you want a reason for why people should go there, well, you're trying to go away from the oppressive laws that don't let you gamble in your own country or something.
Well, oppressive laws in one country that don't apply in other countries, that's a whole other raft of problems right there.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, obviously, it'll probably start off as a giant casino and then eventually have its own police force because it would have to. But that's how you'd get people to move there. You just make it like Brave New World with very little regulation.
and Capistan. Now you're talking my language. To be honest, Libya's already there. We should start
But
now.
dude, the other thing is, it's a country that can move. You
Yes.
don't like your neighbours? Just pull the anchor up and go somewhere else.
Mm. Anyway, you know how long we've been rambling about this for 2 hours? Wow.
Do I know how long we've been rambling about this for 2 hours?
Yeah, we've been rambling about this for an hour and 40 minutes. We've been rambling about this, and if anyone has had the ability to, oh my god, someone has come. Coatrack has commented and tried to I think he's suggesting that I'm pronouncing aluminium wrong
Well, he
because
spelt it wrong either way.
because he's yeah, it's aluminum.
Aluminum still has an extra I in it
I
that he
know.
didn't include. It's the same word, it's just pronounced differently
I
if
know.
you're from the colonies.
Aluminum. It's aluminium.
I
Good
would be
lord.
happy to accept aluminum if you can make it luminous.
Mm,
Otherwise, it's aluminium. Get used to it.
quite. Speak English. Stop butchering things. Anyway, I'm not going to get onto language etymology because that's a whole other subject. Shall we wrap the stream up and bid everyone a good evening and
That
avoid.
might be wise.
We'll
Do
do
you
that.
have anything to go out on?
I don't. I just think yeah, generally make Africa great again, make Australia great again, make everywhere great again. I think is the general uh, theme of this, and yeah, yeah, I think it's a good
And in
idea.
some places,
think
even greater.
I think Elon, if you're watching this, or Bill, or even Jeff Bezos, if you're watching this and you see this and you know what, there's a guy with an idea. I think I'll throw some money his way. Give us a shout, mate. I'll be happy to talk to you. Anyway, we'll leave it at that, and yeah, see you next time. Take care.
Yeah. Bye bye.